Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks to Bob Kay. I'm trying to write outlines for my talks, so there's copies out on the table if you'd like to go home and review it and come back for the test. I'm going to talk about membership today, both in general and about here at the Ethical Humanist Society. I'm kind of glad to be doing something a little lighter than existentialism and the death penalty. But organizationally, this is a very important topic. It's a very expansive subject because it depends obviously on what sort of an organization you're talking about. There's a big difference being a member of a family or a club or an organization or a neighborhood or a church, a tribe, a nation, or a species. Some memberships are formal but superficial, like being a member of the Price Club. Some are informal but pretty fundamental, like being a member of the human race. Today I'm going to focus on primarily three categories of membership, and they're based on three different types of relationships: clientele relationships, cooperative relationships, and identity relationships. These aren't neat and distinct categories: clientele, cooperative, and identity. But I think they're important to help explore what it means to be a member at this place. I'm going to begin by discussing the type of relationship between the individual and group called the clientele relationship. Here, the individual is the customer of the group. These customers' main concern is wrapped up with a question: what do I get? What do I get? And that's a fair question in that context. Usually in exchange for some sort of fee or promise of loyalty or past commitment, the customer gets access to the privileges of membership, as it's quoted in American Express ads. These can be special products at reduced prices, and it can sometimes include some extras like swell swags or tote bags or coffee mugs. One clientele organization I joined years ago was the American Automobile Association, AAA. I was a loyal customer for decades of AAA. It said so right on my car, loyal customer. And what I valued the most was certainly that if you're ever stuck on a dark, deserted rural road at night, you really begin to appreciate reliable roadside assistance, which they did have. I loved getting also the triptychs. Remember before you had all the electronic stuff, these little maps that would show you where to go on your holiday, and they had holiday hints and told you where the road was being torn up and where there were tolls and all of that. Discounts on tickets, as well as other purchases, were icing on the cake. So it was a great deal for about $150 a year. Now, clientele relationships are fine to a degree. But one problem with it is that they can create what I call consumer myopia, short-sightedness. Or it certainly did in my case with AAA. I only saw what was right in front of me, what I got directly in return for my membership. Since I was pleased with what I got for the price, I didn't think harder about what else my membership bought. But then I began reading about the unintended consequences of being a member of AAA. As it turns out, AAA is what its name implies, at least they're honest. It's the American Automobile Association. It's not the American Travelers Association or the American Environmentally Conscious Vacation Goer Association. AAA is about making life easier for automobile use, right? As a result, AAA often follows the lead of the auto industry, especially the American Highway Users Alliance, which is an umbrella lobbying group called by some the biggest pro-pavement lobby in America. The group spends millions of dollars on lobbying against policies that I support. It's been reported that the Highways Alliance and AAA opposes both EPA restrictions on smog, soot, and tailpipe emissions, as well as bike lanes, which I guess get in the way of SUVs and Hummers, right? All of this was wrapped up in an article by Michael Rivlin in On Earth magazine in 2001, where he said, quote, that the AAA even attacked the 1990 Clean Air Act, saying the law served to threaten the personal mobility of millions of Americans. Now, I'm all for personal mobility. But I began to realize that the clientele relationship often is too narrowly defined by both the seller and the consumer. And it doesn't have to be that way. So I changed to how I approach roadside assistance. I didn't want to define myself narrowly, purely as a consumer of goods. I also wanted to be a responsible member of the planet Earth. So I cut up my AAA card and I wrote them to explain why. They keep writing me back, your membership's expired. But now I am a proud card-carrying member of a small but progressive green automobile club, the Better World Club. It's not on a plastic card, it's on a recycled paper card. And while AAA has 50 million members, so they can boast a few more privileges and swag, in this tiny way I'm glad that I'm doing a little bit to help the planet. Because being a client in a narrow sense, seeing only the goods and services and swag that you get, doesn't bring out the best in the consumer or in the group that's given out the swag, frankly. So, second paradigm, another type of membership, is one based on the cooperative relationship. Now, the term co-op can have a lot of wide meanings. There's some overlap also with clientele groups, but most cooperatives imply some form of shared responsibility in governance. Shared responsibility in governance. This was the case, for example, when I was a member of the Washington Ethical Society Sunday School, where I had a shared sense of responsibility. Being a member of the Sunday school at West meant that I had obligations to be involved. I wasn't simply receiving the product, but I was shaping it. You're no longer thinking of yourself as a pure consumer or only of yourself, but you're thinking about a higher purpose to which the organization exists, for which the organization exists. So being a member of the West Sunday School meant that I was helping nurture future engaged ethical citizens. That's different than a clientele relationship. Now, in addition to clientele and cooperative relationship, there's the third type of membership, which I think is based on an identity, on a relationship of identity. Unlike clientele relationships based more on superficial exchanges, membership of identity is not just about what you do or get, it's about who you are. Now, membership of identity is closer to a cooperative relationship than a clientele relationship, but I think it even represents something deeper. It's often wrapped up in emotions, or a sense of belonging, or the very essence of the person. I mean, if you insult the West Sunday School, or the Tacoma Park Food Co-op, or the Better World Club, I'm not going to take great offense. But if you insult my family, I'm going to react differently, because that's a relationship of identity. It's who I am. Now, I think some fans of sport teams tend to have relationships of identity that might go overboard, but nevertheless. To better understand the meaning of membership, I'm going to look a little bit now through the lens of history at what it meant to be a member in this country. Because I think history shows us something different. In the 17th century, Alexis de Tocqueville, the most astute observer of early American culture, pointed out how important membership was to Americans. What de Tocqueville noticed was, as uniquely American, was our penchant for joining. We joined everything. He says, Americans of all ages, of all gradations in life, of all types of dispositions, are forever forming associations. They're not only part of the commercial and industrial associations in which they all take part, but others of thousands of types: religious, moral, serious, feudal, general, and very limited, immensely large, and quite minute. He added that we create groups for any purpose: to hold a celebration, to hand out books, to found a church. He also said that if they want to proclaim a truth or propagate some feeling, they form an association. In every case, at the head of any new undertaking, where in France you would find the government, in the United States you're sure to find an association. I spoke in January here about Ben Franklin at our first Great Thinkers series, about how much Franklin was into forming associations to do things that the government wasn't doing. Now, there are two important points I want to make about this national sort of characteristic. The first is it's an important reason why the United States flourished. After a century and a half of benign neglect by Mother England, Americans began to figure out if they wanted to get something done, they had to do it themselves. and it served us well. Unlike in semi-feudal Europe, here there weren't many lords or nobles handing out things to their vassals and paternalistically caring for them. Secondly, this joining craze in America is both predictably but also paradoxically wrapped up with our individualism. And I think this is interesting. De Tocqueville noted that Americans were highly individualistic, but they also desired to join groups. While at first glance these two characteristics may seem to contradict, they actually don't, and I want to explain why. In old Europe, you were a member of lots of groups. Your town, your nation, your trade guild, and so on. But you were born into those groups. You didn't choose them. They defined you. There was very little social and economic mobility, so you didn't even get to change your groups that often. But in the new American colonies, most people, at least white men, chose to come to this country. They usually chose their trade, their town, their religion, and so on. And with each choice to join one group or another, that actually expressed their individuality. The fact that colonists and citizens could combine their individualism and their group association and make it work is one of the things that historians have praised about the American country, and it contributes to our success, both as individuals and a nation. But recently things have changed, and many of you have been reading some of these things. For example, in Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone, groundbreaking book, he points out that individualism is now becoming to trump group association in America. Americans are no longer joining memberships on a deep level as much as they have in the past. And he claims that it contributes to poorer mental health and the decay of civil society. He offers statistics pointing out that people who join no groups at all have a worse mortality rate than people who join just one deep organization. Joseph M. Schwartz, who's head of the Maryland Psychiatric Society, in review of Bowling Alone, tried to explain somewhat what Putnam was talking about, because he said even in his own organization, it's hard to get people to join his professional organization these days. He said that he blames the clientele perspective on this decline of membership in a deep sense in America. He said that capitalism was getting better and better at creating, quote, informed consumers or educated consumers, but that the clientele relationship was beginning to replace membership on a deeper level. He said attempts by organized psychiatry to woo members by focusing on tangible benefits have not been successful. People are motivated by self-interest, but they realize that often the cost of membership in society exceeds the monetary value of the tangible benefits. Members who join merely to receive tangible benefits, he says, tend not to participate further than just paying their dues. He continues and it says that there's this is an important issue for small groups in particular, religious, educational, activist organizations like ourselves. He says, active members, on the other hand, seem to recognize the intangible benefits of belonging to a group in the maintenance of their professional identity or representation of a profession to others, and the camaraderie and fellowship that comes from belonging and participating. In other words, cooperative relationships and identity relationships create the types of relationships that are best to nurture us, to help us flourish, and create a deep, meaningful relationships in our lives. So, predictably, I'm going to turn back to this place and what membership means at the Ethical Humanist Society here. In my work over the last 4 or 5 years at 5 different ethical societies, a question that often came up was, how can we do better at attracting people who are searching for a progressive, semi-religious community? Now, that phrasing implies, to a degree, a consumer approach to religion. And it makes me feel a little uncomfortable, people shopping around, right? The metaphor implies a clientele relationship, and it can be problematic. Now, on the other hand, it's very useful for us here and at other small groups to talk about a consumer model. It's important that we talk about marketing and advertising and branding to discuss this in a way. Years ago, I was in a workshop on marketing, and I remember I began to repeat the mantra of the presider this was his phrase, marketing is not a dirty word. Okay. And I actually believe that now. Because if we really care about our mission, don't we want to spread it as effectively as possible? And that's why I'm so grateful to Betsy for her press savvy and public relations work, and to Nick for working on the website, making it look nice and updating it, and Janice Moore for our snazzy newsletter, and to all of you who do work to get the word out about us. We have to think in that way. But we also have to remember not to let that clientele model morph into something that is destructive of our deepest values. I don't, for example, want to repeat a scenario that I saw in a Sunday Doonesbury cartoon about a young couple church shopping who end up going to the laid-back Reverend Sloan, the ex-hippie, right? The Reverend says, "So, what do you want to know about the little church of Walden, folks? Don't hold back. I know it can be difficult to choose a church." The husband says, "Well, Reverend, what's your basic approach here? Is it traditional gospel?" "In a way," the Reverend said, "I'd like to describe it as 12-step Christianity. Basically, I believe that we're all recovering sinners. My ministry is about overcoming denial. It's about recommitment and redemption. It's all in the brochure there." The wife interrupts, "Wait a minute, sinners? Redemption? Doesn't that all imply guilt?" "Well, yes," admits the Reverend. "I do rely on the occasional disincentive to keep the flock from going astray. Guilt's a part of that." The husband shakes his head. "I don't know. There's so much negativity in the world as it is." "That's right," the wife agrees. "We're looking for a church that is supportive, a place that we can feel good about ourselves. I'm not sure the guilt thing works for us." Looking at the brochure, the husband then says, "On the other hand, you do offer racquetball." The wife replies, "So do the Unitarians, honey. Let's shop around some more." So, if we overemphasize this clientele relationship, it can reinforce the me-centered message that we are opposed to. It's more dominant in our culture than ever. Modern American capitalism has hyped up this clientele relationship at the expense of more important cooperative attitudes and the identity of belonging. It overshadows the vision that John Kennedy gave years ago: ask not what you can do, what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. It's really become a fabric of, I believe, ethical culture. A part of membership of identity is about a deeper sense of belonging, of inclusion, of being part of a community. It's human nature to want to belong. For here at the Ethical Humanist Society, for many people, it's the number one reason why you're here. I hear so many people say, "I like being part of a warm, welcoming group of like-minded people." And that's wonderful. But here's the challenge. This is the most important part of my talk. If you're not careful, what can feel like a sense of inclusion to those in the group can seem like exclusion to those outside the group. And it's very hard to determine that. Is that happening today? How do we nurture a sense of belonging while remaining open and welcoming to visitors and friends? Because to flourish, all groups have to master this art of balancing what the group stands for with an open invitation to everybody. So in thinking about this challenge, I'm reminded of the words of a poet, Edward Markham. I think maybe some of you might have heard this in your Sunday school years ago. "He drew a circle that shut me out. Heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and took him in." Now, maybe that's simplistic, but I think it's at the heart of ethical humanism. Our tradition, thank goodness, doesn't use the word heretic. We don't label people who are different or deviant from us as necessary to exclude. We strive to bring out the best in others and ourselves. I want to take a moment, though, to look at some of the uglier examples of boundary drawing to help distinguish the type of boundaries that I think we need to have here. How about the Boy Scouts of America? Not the individual troops. Some are very welcoming and open. I'm talking about the national organization. Their website says their mission is to provide, quote, "a program for young people that builds character, trains them in the responsibilities of participating in citizenship, and develops physical fitness." Great mission. But we know that the Boy Scouts draw smaller circles. 10 years ago, they fought in court and won in the Boy Scouts of America v. Dale. The court ruled that because the Boy Scouts of America is a private organization, they can determine their own membership criteria. For Scoutmaster James Dale, despite years of merititious service, being gay put him outside the circle. For our friend Margaret Downey, founder of the Free Thought Society, her son was pushed outside of the circle when he said that he was an atheist. Her court case was dismissed after the Dale ruling was handed down because some cabal high up in the Boy Scouts of America could continue to say that a gay atheist scout would not benefit from a program that builds character, trains citizens, and promotes fitness. We may be boundary-drawing creatures, but we can do this in healthy and ugly ways. When membership in a private association is combined with law, the effects can be devastating. I think back to the role of neighborhood associations in keeping segregated neighborhoods in this country. I read a book a year ago by Antero Piatella. It was called Not My Neighborhood. And he went through all the ways that neighborhoods were using techniques in the law and outside the law to try to keep their neighborhoods, quote-unquote, homogeneous. It disallowed any selling of houses to blacks or to Jews in primarily Christian and white areas, and it was done through these associations and through redlining, where you would take a map and draw a red line and then you deny mortgages or loans or other services to those neighborhoods. And many of these neighborhood associations restricted owners from selling to anyone. Obviously, that's antithetical to how we look at membership here. We want the process of joining our society to be open, ethical, and representative of our values. Not secretive, not demeaning. So we avoid some of the problematic issues involved in joining other groups. So I want to go over a few of the things we're not about here involving joining. First of all, unlike if you want to become a citizen of the United States, you don't have to pledge to go to war with your enemies or mention God. If you want to become a citizen of this country, you have to promise, quote, to bear arms on behalf of the United States when required by law, so help me God. Wow. I'm a member of this club. Secondly, joining the Ethical Humanist Society doesn't involve weird or embarrassing or painful rituals. I hope it didn't feel that way up here for all of you. Not like joining a college fraternity. I'll admit, years ago, I pledged to a college frat. Very odd of me to do this. Some friends convinced me. Zeta Psi. And I was told in my first week I had to make a paddle for my big brother. I quit. They said, oh, no, we're not actually going to paddle you. But I couldn't get out of my head that scene from Animal House in the fraternity. Guys bent over. Thank you, sir. May I have another? Whack. No. Thirdly, and more subtly, joining the Ethical Humanist Society doesn't mean you have to treat everybody here as a family. Now, for some people, it is your family in a very real way, but you don't have to. Of course, we care for each other, we help each other through the ups and downs in life, like many healthy families, but it takes time to grow the sorts of connections that are as real as blood relations. And for some people, that takes them a longer time. And frankly, some members here are so committed to obligations they have with their extended family, the idea of having suddenly 60 more family members is overwhelming, right? So people's commitments here can be of different levels, and it means different things, but it's a natural process of growing into that relationship. One final difference between families in this place is you don't choose to join your family. You choose to join the Ethical Humanist Society. That's an important thing. That choice. And fourth, joining the Ethical Society is not like joining a casual organization. I got into a little hot water when I was talking about this talk with my wife. I said, it's not, joining the Ethical Humanist Society is not like joining a book club. Well, my wife was her loyal membership in her book club for 20 years, she took great offense, and so I want to repeat, it's not like joining a book club that you wouldn't mind leaving. not a lightly taken commitment. And that's why we have a process for membership here. It's not just joining a meetup by clicking a button online. It's not much, but it is here to encourage reflection and commitment. For anyone considering joining, we urge you to come to some platforms and get to know you socials. We urge you to read about our organization on our website or in our literature, to speak with me or with members of the board or with any members. And we ask you for a written application, which then the board votes on to officially have you become a member. And we have a small ritual here, and we hand out some swag, meant simply to show a mutual commitment to personal and ethical growth together. So today, we welcome new members to the society since I came on board. There are some more leaders, more members that we'll welcome at another time to join this year. And in doing so, we're not just welcoming them, we're recommitting ourselves to membership here. It's exciting to me that membership can mean many different things to different people. Some appreciate the sense of community as the most important thing. Others appreciate the ability to work on ethical action projects together. And some love to come to the stimulating talks and classes. And all of these are important to you all in different degrees, and that's part of our strength. I want to conclude by talking a little bit about what, to me, it means to be a part of the Ethical Humanist Society and ethical culture in general. It's a bit different for me because I have a special role. I'm your leader. I've been hired to be your professional clergy. That's a very distinct role. When I was in leadership training, I heard what many aspiring ministers in all denominations hear. You can't just be a member of the group because you have a special job to do. But like each of you, I feel a very strong connection to ethical culture and to the Philadelphia Society. And for me, it's because it carries a strong sense of sharing and belonging. When I first joined the Washington Ethical Society, I appreciated the shared benefits, the talks and the classes and the service opportunities. And I also enjoyed the shared accomplishments of working together, cleaning up after a social event, or helping other members at a homeless shelter. And I appreciated the shared commitment and responsibility. And slowly over time, I grew a sense of shared identity. Who I was became an ethical culturist. I won't go as far as my son Sean, who got a tattoo on his ankle of the ethical culture logo. But I am very happy when somebody says, "Tell me about yourself." Quite often the first thing I say is, "Oh, I'm an ethical humanist." And I launch into that. In admitting this, I kind of surprised myself because I was never really a joiner, especially as an adult. I'm a skeptic, I'm a free thinker, I worry about groupthink, and I'm protective of my private time and space. But I was drawn intensely to ethical humanism and to this society, and I honor the opportunity to serve it, to serve the worth of all, ethical relationships and social justice, and to nurture within all people the capacity to bring out their best. And balancing this dedication to mission with growing an appreciative, welcoming community enriches my life. So on the organizational level, this was brought home to me when I was on the board of the Washington Ethical Society. We were in the middle of a huge transition in leadership, and our physical plant was being torn up, and there was a lot of angst. Stephen Jonathan, who was a consultant for the UUA, came, and I remember he said very clearly to me how important it was to balance community and mission. And the way he explained it was that if community is overemphasized, rigid boundaries can grow around the community that can keep the rest of the world away. In the end, we can end up attracting people just like us and only like us, and that can be destructive. It can kill a congregation, because diversity is important. It enriches us, it stimulates our growth. We have to nurture sort of a healthy boundary between us and the outside world. We have to have some boundaries, but it's like the wall of a biological cell. It's got to be porous enough to let nutrients in and waste out. It's how any organism grows and flourishes. So for us here, the meaning of membership has to include a deep sense of identity that's ever expanding, that's ever inclusive. We have to offer cooperative relationships that people can use to express their values with each other. And we can have a clientele relationship too as long as we keep it in perspective. While membership in the Ethical Humanist Society of Philadelphia involves all three types of relationships, clientele, cooperative, and identity, at the heart remains working together, sharing responsibility, and belonging to a group that's welcoming, inclusive, and warm. It's not about bowling alone. When you join this organization, you are joining together. If you're a visitor today and you like what goes on here, I urge you to seek membership. If you're a member already, I urge you to deepen that relationship. Make it more meaningful. And I look forward to working with all of you to try to make sense of the meaning of membership. Thank you very much.